I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, July 11th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before we get started, I'd like to thank members of the public for attending the school board business meeting to observe the work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. We appreciate the time you took to be here this evening. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file.
Yes, this evening we have several consent agenda items under personnel. We have some appointments, several decrease changes in assignment, and we do have a resignation, and that is what is in the table file for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. No. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff, second by Amy. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Anita, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Okay, we do not have anybody for public comment, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
And this evening, we're going to start off with a special announcement and recognition from the Minnesota Community Education Association, and we're very excited to have members of our ECFE staff here tonight to receive the project award. So welcome, Kaya.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Hillman. My name is Kaya Bruce, and I'm the director in Rosemount Apple Valley Egan. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to join you this evening on behalf of the Minnesota Community Education Association as a Region 5 board representative. Each year, the Minnesota Community Ed Association accepts nominations for project awards. These awards are presented for outstanding projects that have exemplified the concept of community education. Project winners are announced each year at the Minnesota Community Education Fall Conference, and it is my pleasure to share with you that Northfield Community Education received an MCEA Project Award for their ECFE outdoor classroom this past fall. Play may seem simple, yet it is profound to a child's development. In August 2020, the Northfield Community Education Center opened. Due to the need for children to have more experiences outdoors, desires for outdoor play expressed by early childhood family education families, and the COVID-19 global health pandemic, an ECFE outdoor classroom was created at the Northfield Community Education Center. This outdoor classroom allows children and families to experiment, be outdoors, and play. The ECFE outdoor classroom is right outside the building and provides additional space for programming as well as training space for teachers. This space allows children to be outside even when the weather is rainy and snowy. This innovative project is a model example of what the MCEA Project Awards are intended for. Congratulations to Flavia Berg, ECFE teacher, Ellen Hafner, ECFE parent educator, and Aaron Bailey, Director of Community Ed, for developing this amazing project and making it such a great success. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think there's a few more pictures that we could find.
Oh, there's a slide. Is there a slide?
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you want us to move?
I'm recording.
Sorry.
Okay.
So Tim, if you want to rotate through those other photos, that'd be great. Congratulations. We always think of innovation of our ECFE program. They've always been ahead of the curve on so many things that we take for granted here in Northfield. We have several other photos, so I don't know if you want to describe what these are at all.
That's a little music and noise wall for the toddlers.
So that's a split picture on the left-hand side. That's in the preschool side for the older kiddos, the music wall. And then we actually have 2 slides. This is an up slide because it takes 2 different kinds of muscles, going up a slide versus coming down the slide.
It's not going up a slide. It feels, like they're not supposed to do it. This is just a little nature area where kids can roll back logs, look for bugs, In that structure there on the right, we have some stretchy bands where kids can kind of make some designs with rubber bands, really great fine motor skills done there.
This is our block area. Most of our blocks are actually wood chunks. They're not blocks like you would see in a regular classroom. They're wood chunks.
And there on the left is a bus or an airplane or a car. It's many, many things, but just some old chairs that we're gonna probably go in the trash after all the shifting of schools. And Flavia put them on a log, and there we have, you know, whatever the kids think of. And then in the corner is probably what you've seen the most driving down Lincoln Parkway is our boat. And kids just love the boat and the dock. Lots of fishing. Parents go in there. It's very sturdy. It tips a little bit, but it is good and sturdy.
Then that's our Rock River. So kids can pick up rocks. We've added a bridge across the Rock River which is a little bit older. And then along the fence, that fence divides our preschool side from our toddler side. And there's a chalkboard there and there's a pegboard there. That black case you see holds things. There's black cases throughout the space to hold equipment and materials.
And then there's our downslide. And then we have some balance beams and some ramps, great for gross motor. Oh, and the ball shoots. On the far, you can see the yellow, red, green things. Those are just PVC pipes painted really fun colors. And kids will sit and drop balls through those tubes forever.
And on the left side, that's like our circle time area. And on the right side, we have a balance scale. So kids can put things on the two, like where the yellow pieces, those two white pieces, bowls, yeah. Kids can put rocks, shells, pine cones, whatever they find in there.
And it's on a level, so they can actually like try to watch that bubble, the level bubble. Self-explanatory, just our fun little twig vine teepee hut house. It's whatever the kids
It's
want it to
whatever
be.
they want it to be. Then that's back to the music wall in the preschool side.
Oh, just little nooks, little tables. That's the one on the right. You can kind of see we took a sink, an actual sink, the same sink that's in my kitchen, actually. It's a really good sink. It made essentially a mud kitchen. There's mud, sand in there, but otherwise the kids can pretend to serve each other food, and the food is pine cones and wood chips and sand. We get served all sorts of delicious cuisine here.
So just to finish up on this, I would just like to read our school district vision, which is we prepare every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society. And if the CFE outdoor classroom is not a wonderful example of part of our district attempting to fulfill that vision, I'm not sure what is. In that, we heard about learner outcomes. We heard about being able to see the teeter-totter, right? And figuring out which side. We heard a lot of mathematical thinking. We heard a lot about social emotional learning. We also heard about good stewardship, using things that might have been tossed otherwise and now are taking people to interstellar experiences on some days and deep sea voyages on another. And I just don't think that we say this enough, but play is children's work. And so when we think about the hard academic outcomes that we are looking for down the line, they start with ECFE. And we focused on the young learners, but there are also other learners who are at ECFE, their parents, who are thrilled with this because this engages their children so that those parents can have that important time to talk. So we have always appreciated the work that community education and our ECFE program have done to support the district's vision and our strategic commitments. And we know that the achievement of our benchmarks are a direct result of the work that you have done with our youngest learners. So we thank you for leading the way for us in modeling continuous improvement and living out our strategic plan. So well done. And we are so happy that you were honored with this award tonight. You should get an award every year is what I think, but
Yes.
so thank you. We're going to, we would keep going about this one. So I'm going to move on here.
We encourage you to just on a walk by, check it out. If there's maybe somebody out there playing, we'll let you in. We'll let you in and play anytime.
They probably need to check in with the office first though, right, Aaron? So,
That'd be great.
yeah.
If we're out there, come play.
But how many people driving along Lincoln Parkway knew the cornucopia of activities that was happening inside that fence, right? So
Fantastic.
very well done. We have two other announcements this evening. One is I just want to share with board members that on Friday, learned that we will be receiving a $6,000 donation from the Dakota County Electric Cooperative. As a member, as a school district that has geographic land in their service area, Dakota County Electrical Cooperative provides donations to its member schools on a rotating basis. So we will be providing the $6,000 to the high school technology and engineering department for them to continue to update their equipment. And so we made a lot of progress in updating their equipment this past year through our capital process. But we know there were some additional items that they could either look at purchasing right now, depending upon the cost, or they could withhold that money and apply it as we use the capital process again next year to update equipment. So we just want to thank Dakota County Cooperative for being able to provide that generous funding for us, and that we're going to be using it to try to, again, help develop technology and engineering skills. And then the final announcement that I have for this evening, I'm actually going to take a segment of the report that I will be giving a little bit later in the evening. And I want to just introduce to you Shane Byer, our new high school principal. So I'm going to ask Mr. Byer to come to the podium here for a moment, and I'm just going to say a few words about him and then give him a chance just to say a couple of things here. They have assistant principal interviews tomorrow, so I want him to be able to leave afterwards and be preparing for that. But one of our strategic commitments is people. And what we know is that what research tells us is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to people in a school work environment, our employees, is leadership. And we know that leadership matters, and we know that leadership is challenging and enjoyable and fulfilling and all of those kinds of things. But if we really want to be able to achieve our strategic plan commitments and our benchmarks, leadership matters. And I could not be more proud than to present to you Mr. Shane Byer, who checks all those boxes tonight. So as you know, Shane assumed his role beginning July 1. He succeeds Dr. Lear, who has now taken a position of professor of educational leadership at MSU in Mankato. And I'm sure he's still sweating from the experience, but we had over 40 staff, students, and community members involved in a very rigorous interview process on one day of interview. And we call it a selection process for a reason. There was the interviews, and then there were also an additional meeting with me later in the week to finalize our selection. And we're so thrilled that Shane is part of our team now. He's served as a principal at Mankato East High School, at a middle school in Spearfish, South Dakota, Mountain Home Junior High School in Idaho, and most recently as the principal at Washington Elementary School in Mankato. Much like Noel Stratmon, he's got degrees from South Dakota State University, so we know that that makes Noel happy. And he has an educational specialist degree from MSU in Mankato. And what I'll tell you is probably for about 10 days after we announced Shane's hiring, Hope Langston, myself, and other leaders every day had someone contact us and say, "Oh my goodness, how did you get Shane Byer?" They were not only impressed, but they were thrilled for us. And these are people whom I trust and many of our leaders trust and admire throughout the state. So I've stopped short of saying that this is the Carlos Correa signing of the offseason for you Minnesota Twins fans, but we're so thrilled to have Mr. Byer join our team. And I'd offer to allow him just to say a couple of words right now.
Yeah. So Dr. Hillman, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. I think when we get to our stage in the career, I mean, I am not new at this, but this is a new thing. And so you show up with humility and grace. And it's been really interesting. I've been perusing about 180 comments from staff, students, and families about what they view Northfield, how they view the system, and things that they think are going well, and what things they might think we might want to do differently or better. So it's interesting. The top 4 things were outstanding teachers and staff, high expectations for standards of learning and achievement, strong partnerships and community, and excellence in activities, having a broad spectrum of things for students to be involved in. So those are the things that I would have predicted that would come through. And so interestingly enough, a few things that students, staff, and families all agree on is that They want someone to show up, be kind, show up and be a strong leader, uniter. And I'm all those things. But I can tell you the first thing that I must be is a learner in a new system. And there's a lot of great things happening in Northfield. I'm here because of your reputation of greatness and excellence in education, and I want to be a part of that. And so I recognize that there's a big legacy for that I follow in Dr. Lear, and I will work my best to serve the people of the Northfield and the students that are at Northfield High School. So thank you for your trust in me in this important role. I will do my very best to meet all your expectations.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now moving on to items for discussion and reports. We have 7 items tonight. We're going to begin with a review of the Northfield High School Facility Task Force findings and discuss our next steps. Members, your questions can be answered by Sal Bagley of Wold, Director of Finance, Val Murdersdorf, and Dr. Hillman. I am going to call on each board member, as I did last time, to share any new thoughts. And I've asked Dr. Hillman to help me facilitate our conversation tonight, as it's important, it's complicated, it's not straightforward. And so we'll work through it together. Our goal is to find a path forward and then also talk about the timing of when to move forward. So I will start at the end of the table here with Julie again. If you need a minute to collect your thoughts, you can do that. And of course, ask any questions as we move down the table here.
Did I understand that you were making comments, Matt, or no?
I think I can
Dr.
give a
Hillman?
reframe so
Okay.
for people watching, the school board meeting tonight, or not doing this. We are continuing to work down the pathway. We convened a task force. We had over 30 community members being part of that task force to look at the existing Northfield High School and to try to recommend potential renovations, additions to, number one, improve the infrastructure of the facility while also looking at instructional and activity improvements that would really modernize the facility. The board along the lines have always had the option of considering a new building as well. We've received that task force report in early June. Sal Bagley from Wold Architects and Engineers provided that at the board meeting in June. Later in June, we held a work session. Actually, late June, early July, we held a work session in which we dove deeper into it, and board members had a chance to share their perspectives on the report and what pathways they were thinking were a way to move forward. And we really tried to start to, again, funnel down to what is the pathway forward. There's, to me, as Claudia said, there are 2 questions. One is, what is the pathway forward for the facilities plan for Northfield High School that the elected board says, yep, this is the plan moving forward. We've given you several different options to consider from. Then once we have consensus around that is the pathway forward, it's about when do we go to the community to ask them to help us fund those improvements. Very few of the items that are offered are things that we would be able to attack within our existing capital plan. So this will need to involve the voters and some additional funding in some way, shape, or form. So board members had an opportunity at the last work session to be able to really dive into that, share their perspectives with each other, ask some clarifying questions. And what we're asking tonight is to try to just keep getting closer to what is the path forward and what would the timing to ask the voters to help us with that. So with that, I will give that back to Julie.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hillman. So I would begin initially by saying how much I really appreciated the discussion we had at the work session and how that really helped me sort of determine, both of the, the questions that we are addressing and hope to address continuing tonight. So I really like the plan, the renovation plan. I think that Wold did an amazing job of taking our stakeholders' input and really putting it into a plan. I believe that it really addresses the vital needs of a structurally sound building. I think approving the plan and then moving forward in terms of how we implement the various aspects of the plan will really reflect our ongoing commitment to financial stewardship. And that being including responsibly managing our property. So I'm very supportive of the plan. I have given a lot of thought in terms of what's the timeline, which is the next question before us, obviously tonight to grapple with. But as I continue to review it, I think that this November does give us an opportunity to begin addressing the most pressing needs and to really prioritize where we see the needs, the most pressing needs. So I could delve further into how I would see those questions being on the ballot in November, but I think that's getting a little bit ahead of the initial thoughts you want from board members. So to summarize, I am really supportive of the plan. I think it's really a really good one. I think it does really address the most pressing needs of the high school while being fiscally responsible. And I do think that there is a path forward for us in November of 2022.
And so Julie, just to be clear, you're thinking through that the items that were presented as in the master plan prioritization that were recommended by the task force, that you're comfortable with those items, and yet how we might divide them up into, if potentially multiple questions, is something that you would talk further about. But in general, the list of things are things that you would be able to consider getting behind, but it might get divided out in a little bit of a different way.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you, Julie. Tom?
Do I have 7 minutes? I have some comments that I wrote down. Actually, when they were talking about the early childhood and the sound making wall, I'm thinking that's appropriate in a lot of spaces. But, so I'm going to, I think you all know where I stand, but I try to write it down so it's a little more explanatory. 5 years ago, the school board recognized the need for a new high school. Many people had known that for years. That referendum ultimately failed, though not by much. I was at the meeting when a community group suggested waiting 5 years to try again. Here we are. In those 5 years, the need for a new, modern, more flexible facility has only become more apparent. Yet now the only choice appears to be renovating what we have again. It was said that the building doesn't matter. After all, look at all the high-achieving students Northfield has. We celebrate those, but not all students are extroverted high achievers. For many kids, coming into the school building is a struggle. Being crammed in like sardines in some of the classrooms or rushing in packed halls with the anxiety-inducing stress that causes is all the student focuses on for their class period. Some get lost metaphorically and literally in the maze of the school. Some need to detach and distance themselves from others for even a short time. This may not be your experience, but it is very real for many students. Who notices and speaks for them? If our aim and vision is for every student to succeed, we must acknowledge and accommodate this. Getting away in the more open and bright media center is relished by everyone. I wonder why. If you look at the new high schools being built today, they feature open, flexible spaces, abundant natural light, big windows, high ceilings, wide halls. You don't see buildings being built like ours for a reason. What does it tell you? What do people recognize about a building that matters? A renovation may have some spaces that match these characteristics, and we can say, see, we have those spaces. But it is harder to make a deliberate, holistic solution when you're constrained by what is, rather than what could be. Don't be ruled by fear. Be bold, think big, take chances, do a moonshot. If we go down the road of sinking tens of millions of dollars into this facility, the community will be stuck with it for decades, for generations of thousands of kids. Is that our vision and goal? A new school will not be possible for 30 or 40 years or more, possibly not in the lifetime of our own kids. I truly hope the community understands the implications of this. I truly hope the community understands the implications of this. We might not know exactly what education will be like going forward, but fundamentally it'll be much the same. Some might be online, but mostly it will involve kids in schools where they want to be. Having a flexible space allows us to change to accommodate that. Feedback from teachers and students was gathered and a long list of important needs were recorded for the existing high school. The estimated cost to implement them is upwards of $90 million. A new school would address those needs and more, would cost about $120 million. A $90 million renovation is 75% the cost of a new high school. According to the Minnesota Department of Education, building new should be seriously considered when renovation costs exceed 60% the cost of building new. We're way past that. It was pointed out that a new school would cost about $1 a day on a $250,000 house. For my personal situation, the cost is $1.50 a day, or a 0.75% increase over my current expenses. For perspective, my landline phone is $1 and the day, and my family cell phones are $8 a day. I ask that the taxpayers give a new school fair and honest consideration before dismissing it outright. Look at your monthly budget and what a new school would actually cost you relative to your monthly expenditures, and be honest with yourself as to whether you can afford it or not. It is not as much as you think, but think of the good it will do. I beg you to put education of our nation's future as our most important priority. Don't be confused. Renovations will still increase your taxes. We need to consider the value we are getting for the tax dollars we are proposing to spend. Does it really make more financial sense to throw money at the past rather than building for the future? There was a lot of discussion about field houses and hockey rinks, but a little, if any, about the academic space needs. How and what can renovation really accomplish to take Northfield students through the 21st century? Our school is stuck in the 1960s and always will be. In my opinion, we do our students a huge disservice by keeping them stuck in the past too. School safety is a top priority for parents with dozens of doors and points of entry. How safe is the school? With our experience with COVID and the need for ventilation, how well can that be mitigated in a sprawling, low ceiling structure? A previous school board had the option of remodeling the old Greenville Elementary School. Wisely, they chose to build new. They chose instead to build new. The difference couldn't be more stark. That is the decision here. Learning from our recent experiences with school safety, the pandemic, online and hybrid learning, the desire of students to be in school, the importance of bright, welcoming, and uplifting space, the importance of high ceilings, the importance of natural light, the importance of space as in not crammed in a room, the importance of space as mentioned in creature comforts, the importance of wider halls, the importance of flexibility in teaching methods and spaces. Oh my gosh, the importance of modern science labs, the importance of collaborative spaces, the importance of online class stations, the importance of modern career and technical education spaces, including agriculture, the need for additional athletic facilities, the need for more accessible and environmentally controlled music space, the importance of recognizing that the student experience does matter, and the fact that we are building for generations of students for the 21st century and beyond. I can only support starting over with the deliberate intention in building a new modern school. Anything else, in my opinion, is a mistake and a waste of hard-earned tax dollars. We can't afford to be penny wise and pound foolish. By its vote, our community will decide what it wants and what it gets. Kids can't vote. So this is what I suggest. How about we keep and renovate the competition gym, keep and renovate the auditorium, keep and renovate the V-wing, build a new 2-story modern classroom building, the heart and the soul of the high school, that addresses all the needs identified by the facility task force, including a cafeteria. Design it with the capability to cohesively expand in the future. Build a needed additional gym space. Tear down most of the old structure except for spaces that can be used for ITS storage or other district needs, if any. Possibly use some space and rent to local nonprofits. Among other things, this would have a minor impact with ongoing school operations. I'm not willing to support anything that does not upfront and once and for all address the multitude of needs articulated by teachers and students. We do it all now with a vision, a plan, and a commitment, and move on. So, and about my suggestion of a of a two-story new school. I talked with Sal, and her estimate on that cost would be 100 to maybe 105 million. So if you subtract the 40 million, that is the tax offset, that leaves an increase of 60 million on for the taxpayer, which is less than the 80 million that we asked for 5 years ago. If those numbers hold. Anyway, that's where I stand, and I'm I guess those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Tom. Do you have a sense on the timing of that? If you would want to move forward on the, when we should move forward with?
No time like the present.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff Quinnell here, just ending my third term, also a townie and a sports guy. I look over my fellow football fan here. I'm a big fan of yours, sir, Bubba, and congratulations on your new position. That was a private meeting, I guess, the work session we had, but just to kind of recap, and in general, my position, I look at 2022, what's your ask in 2024? I think we're in a really uncertain time as a country and just the way things are going. I have a friend of mine that builds high-end houses, and I've talked to some other construction people, and, with the construction indexes being, from 10 to 20%, very much on the high end. Now it's not a very favorable time. I mean, I do think the urgency to necessarily do something, things aren't falling apart. That's, questionable as far as, the urgency of moving forward. I am for, looking at the high school, and I guess, going back to 64 when that was built, it's, and as we learned in the task force, it's about 250,000 square feet. 100,000 of that was added on, there are about 6 of them on future additions after the first part. I mean, I think responsible government is to go back and, let's call it a 40-40 to look at up to 40,000 or 40 million up to kind of a renovation of things that you're going to do and stick obviously with the high school. I also think though, too, when you're asking for, and I look at these elections and I say, what's your ask? And you always want to try to get the trust of the public and the taxpayer. And I do kind of really regret, and Julie brought this up earlier, and I just kind of, I wish I would have thought of it earlier, is to do some kind of taxpayer survey earlier on. I mean, I'd like to hear what the taxpayers say, because it's easy to say you want this, that, and that, but I want to hear what the taxpayers say. If they're in favor of that, if you get a 50+% movement, I didn't really get it necessarily a vibe from that. So I do think that that's something that I didn't see and kind of missed. And you say that there's not enough time now, which, there's always plenty of time. Maybe on this election. So anyway, you get the idea with that. I also think too, when, 2024, coming out to the next election, what's the ask for that? We have the highest levy to, renew for that. So we got to ask the taxpayer for that. I think gas prices right now are a big concern, and the extra money that's we're going to have to come up with, and that's going to go on for a long time through the school district, added cost together. And I'm very much interested in making an absolute priority about reasonable insurance costs for the employees and the people. So, and I know that maybe that's separate money and stuff, but you can kind of only get asked kind of so much from people, and they kind of, back off a little bit and think maybe you're asking for too much. I guess to look at going back to 2017, I actually voted for just to get a pulse to see at $80 million what they thought for a new school. And, it failed. Now that number's potentially 120 or whatever it is for a new school. We also I never saw a plan. I never saw anything about what 80 million even looked like. All we ever talked about back then was it'd be similar to what Andover has. So that we never did actually show a floor plan or any kind of plan of that. And then also we never really did look at it. Even you talk about now, I mean, certainly the high school is not a tear down. So it's $4 to $6 million that could be debated to tearing down the high school. And then how do you repurpose the high school? And I even said in our work session with the construction people, I said, well, if we wrote you a check for 120 million right now to build a new school, what are we doing with the high school? So, I mean, there's a lot of things to, you know, to weigh out. As far as this election cycle, what I think, I like, I mean, I don't know where you're at with your questions, but, you know, people, I think, you know, we've got coming up on the renewal of so it's kind of like, you know, what would be the tax rebate per property, if you didn't add that 40 million? Because really you can go and add what, 38, 39 million or something like that with not raising taxes. So I look at the question, if there was a question on that, is like, you know, are you in favor of, you know, not doing that and getting a tax rebate or not being taxed on your property, or are you in favor of doing the initial part of that? And I mean, I do look at it as 40 and 40. I mean, that's oversimplified, but as far as the future things and, you know, I'm more about the high back and taking care of the things that, you know, the building really needs. But I think with that, I don't think necessarily this is a good time to ask for things, but I do think responsible government would phrase it in a question of, you know, if we don't vote on this right now, next election site, will you get, you know, the rebate of X amount of dollars? But based on where I see moving forward with the high school, if it's, you know, 40 at a, you know, a bond, kind of more of a bond that's a maintenance bond, and then 40 kind of moving forward. I mean, that's the range of doing things. You know, that's where I definitely with, I as far as the new high school, I don't see that as, you know, I know Northfield people and stuff, people actually that have talked to me when they talk about stuff about high school, they kind of almost get mad as far as, you know, it's good enough, it's okay. So I don't think moving people off of that part, and it'd be kind of a tough part, you know, just off the bat. Now, we're always putting money into the high school, but it's kind of a tough deal if you ever go back and tear down the high school that you're just, you know, like right now on the administrative part of it, you're doing $1 million, you know, improvement. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm looking at. So it's kind of with I don't think now is necessarily urgent, but again, I do think responsible government would be, you know, where do you want to be? We're, you know, it's moving forward on the high school, keeping high school doing what you got to do to get it up to date. And I'm more about the renovation of making the high back and stuff current and that, and then seeing where to go from there. So instead of asking for that whole bundle of money or whatever it is to fix that, I'm more interested in making it safe. And there's plenty of square footage there. I know that, and I'll finish with this, is, you know, we had, you know, if we look at population of students going down, I mean, we're talking, where are we at, 1,200 at the high school now, or 1,300? So it's 13, maybe we go down 100, but even at 32, as you said, 32 people a classroom, I mean, that school could really support 1,700. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do with the renovation and a lot of different things in that too. And the building is sound and different things. So I just think as far as taxpayers' money goes, but I'm much more interested in making sure that we're, you know, being honest with which I mean, obviously we're going to be honest with the taxpayer and ask good questions. We want to leave that to them, but to give them the choice of whether they would like to get a little bit of a rebate on their taxes for now, or, you know, just not have their taxes raised up and look at taking a shot at that 40 million and making a priority where you want to do on phase 1 of that 40 million right now.
So Jeff, I hear you saying that you recognize the need for investment in the existing building. I hear you saying you probably need it in 2 potential phases. One that would be taking care of the existing maintenance issues, the HVAC, the windows, things like that. Another segment that could potentially modernize some of the facility while staying on the same site. And then I hear you struggling, like I think a lot of people are, about what is the timing of an election. Is the volatility too strong for November? But you also recognize that those things could be done now. Am I capturing what you said fairly close?
That's pretty close.
Then the one other piece I just want to be super clear about is that I think just at the beginning of your comments, you were talking about the work session. I heard the term private. I just want to be really
Right,
clear
right.
that
It wasn't. Okay, go ahead.
it was a public session. It
Okay.
just is, when we do a work session, we don't stream those or record them. So I just want to be really clear for folks that work sessions are open to the public. We don't have all that many of them when you look at the scope of time. I just wanted to clarify. I knew what you meant, but I
Right,
just
right,
didn't
yeah.
want someone
Sorry.
listening to not have that
Right, yeah.
particular
Sorry,
context.
I didn't phrase that properly.
No problem. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your comments.
Okay, Amy.
Hello, I have two answers for you. First, I have to say, I really like Tom's visionary approach. And I really like his thinking outside the box and trying to solve this problem. And I really think he says a lot of good things about we're making a decision that very well could impact the high school for 30 or more years. And that's a lot of students. And so this is a very, very serious conversation we're having, because it's not just 5 years or 10 years, it's probably much longer. I am curious about how much sort of a half and half approach would cost, with Tom suggesting that we keep the more usable, more recent sections of the high school, but then maybe build the other half in a new, more modern way. So we're not keeping the whole high school, we're doing a half and half, or maybe it's 1/3 and 2/3. That would be interesting idea to explore and see where that takes us, and see if we think that's worth going anywhere. Because right now, we're looking at $87 million for if we did everything, and that could be over a course of several different referenda, but it's still $87+ million. If it's only $100 million to take the half and half approach, maybe that's something that we should discuss and think about at least, because this is a very big deal. So that's my first answer. My second answer is the one I came in with today, and I'm still going to say that, because I do think there's the part of me that really wants to be visionary like Tom, but then there's the practical side of me, and that I want to not necessarily propose something that the voters will say no to, because then we have another 2 years or 4 years or 6 years before anything is done. And we do have some urgency with at least the maintenance needs. So my plan that I came in here with, I'm going to call voters' choice. And I'm looking at a referenda that would have 4 tiers to it. And that's really something that we let the voters look at and let the voters decide how invested they are in the high school. So the first tier, and I'm just going to talk generally, would be sort of maintenance needs and maybe some of the renovated specialized classrooms, to target about the amount that's dropping off the tax rolls right now. So there would be only a small increase in taxes for each household. So that we could decide what that meant once we get those dollars figured out. I really do think our voters would approve that. I think everyone understands maintenance. I think they'd have to approve. I mean, they need that money. So I think that would be something that we could sell. But then I'd like to give the voters a second tier. And the second tier would include the changes on here that would affect the current high school building, which is like the new music classrooms and the auditorium updates. I mean, the auditorium is 25 years old and those seats are getting pretty well worn at this time. And also some of the other improvements for the more flexible spaces and flexible furniture. It's at this level that the storm shelter would kick in. And I think actually having a storm shelter is a very important piece that we need to explain to our citizens, our voters, because I think everyone understands with climate change, with the weather getting more severe, that we need to have a safe spot for our students. So that would be the second tier. I also am a very optimistic person. I think we'd have a good chance of having that pass as well. But again, it would be up to the voters. The third tier I would see as a sort of athletic tier where we'd say, all right, we also have these needs with a field house and maybe the turf that I could go in various ways with the turf. But that's a whole new building. And I think that is something that would be easier to also bring up in a referendum 2 years, 4 years down the line. But since we have the opportunity, why not ask now? Because things only get more and more expensive. So that's would be my third tier. And then the fourth tier would be the ice rink. And that, I know there was a lot of discussion last time about whether it's appropriate for the school district to take on the ice rink. And I'm going to tell a little bit about my reasoning here about why I think the ice rink should be included. First, we know that Northfield's ice rink is going to be out of commission in 2024. So there is some urgency to get a new ice rink. Secondly, we'd be the main users of the ice rink. There'd be other groups, but our group would be, our school district would be an important group. Third, there would be some cost savings, and I'm going to Sal later to confirm this. But if we were to combine it with the field house, it might cost, I don't know, a couple $1 million less to build an ice rink with the field house.
The shared facilities. like
Because of the
locker
shared
rooms and some of the other.
Yeah, the shared facilities, maybe shared walls, you know, we wouldn't need two separate buildings, bathrooms. Yeah, all various things that there would be some savings there. I also think it would save our taxpayers. I know a lot of people last time at our work session were saying this is the city's responsibility. The city has to take care of it. And the city can just do it without even voters approving it. I mean, but if that happens, last time, which was 4 years ago, they were suggesting something that was $25 million. So even 4 years ago, it was more expensive than what we're suggesting now. And then on top of that, if they were to do something similar, I would imagine their prices, the cost would go up maybe to 30 million. I'm just guessing. So $30 million, it would go just for the Northfield residents to cover the cost of that. And then, you know, the other people wouldn't have to. So we have a broader base. We have the school district base, and more citizens would end up contributing. It might be, you know, half the cost or 60 or 70% of the cost of what we pay through the city. And I think it would be a valuable thing to have in our city as well. I think city development is important and we support that. All of that being said, I think part of this should be discussions with the city and how much money could they contribute to this? Could they contribute the cost of the land and the property that they're selling to Aurora Pharmaceuticals? Can they give that to us? Can they, yeah, Aurora Pharmaceuticals has offered to make a donation, but no amount has been said. You know, is that something? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Can we get that for us? Then would the city give us an annual amount of money for taking on this responsibility? So that's, I would suggest a partnership where they give us money and we do everything else because we know we do it well. And so I think there's possibilities here to get the hockey rink done well at a better savings and less cost to our citizens. And I think it's something we should consider taking a role in. So that's where I am. 4 tiers this year, and giving the voters a chance to decide for themselves. Thank you.
Jamie? No.
I'd like to open by saying, I don't believe that visionary is always to build new. I think visionary is to renovate in some way what you have so it can be visionary for the future. I believe the taxpayers spoke at the last vote. They recognized the building structure is built like a rock. And I'm pleased that we're discussing the possibility of repurposing, remodeling, reconfiguring the building. It's a building that I hope soon is going to be refigured as a high school. It's exciting, I think, for the alumni, for the voting, for the residents, and for financial stewardship that we need to do. I'm comfortable with the conclusion of the task force and that they direct us to have responsible government.
Thank you. And also your feeling it for renovation or just maintenance, renovation? And you have okay, and you have a sense for the timing on that? Like, do you want us to move forward? Okay, so I just appreciate all the comments that were made and the creative thinking that came out of this conversation, and also the witty comments. Appreciate that. Personally, still, I think we all, or I should say, I have this dream for a new high school as well. And I have wrestled with, as I said before, the fact that I'm in partnership with our community, our all of the stakeholders. And so I don't feel, I feel very inspired with the thought of a new high school, but I don't feel like I can move forward with a new high school. So I do have a lot of confidence in a renovation that would include updated spaces and modernized and more collaborative. I did speak with a community member this weekend that had some very similar thoughts, Tom, in terms of keeping the space, renovating certain parts of it, and then building new in a different direction on the same spot. And so that was very interesting. And then was glad to hear your thoughts tonight. We're kind of meshing with what this community member was envisioning. So I think there is space for renovating, and a renovation that could include, I mean, we are talking about possibly building a field house, so there could be space for building classroom space. I like that idea a lot. So I would agree with a renovation that would include items from the prioritization list, but I would focus in on those updates that would build collaborative spaces, better lighting, especially, and then of course updated labs and the music spaces. And then I would see a value in moving forward this November.
So to summarize here, we have a lot of different perspectives, right? Which is exactly what I would have expected. We heard some folks with evolved thinking since the last time, and really thinking in different ways of how the voters could have different choices and really be able to determine what the pathway forward is. The reason we are in the messy middle, right? This is a tough time because we have a building that is structurally sound, but that was constructed at a time. I'm very interested because tomorrow morning, the Hubble, that they're going to release these photos from the, I think it's the Webb telescope, the latest NASA telescope. And I think about the things we're going to see about our galaxy universe that will be very interesting. And yet we do have a building that we know was built before the moon landing, right? So we know that we continue to update and adjust, and that the future, we don't exactly know what the future is going to bring, right? In terms of all of the different kinds of things that our students are going to need. Our learning plan, right, is an important plan. The strategic plan gives us very clear direction about what we are trying to accomplish with our students. And the building does play a role in that. We know that, right? The building does play a clear role. But the reason that it's difficult is because everyone's perspective from a certain point of view is right. We are talking about a very interesting and difficult political time in terms of running an election. Unlike any other entity, we have to go to the voters to ask for the assistance with this. But we do have a couple of things that we need to really get closer on. I first want to just talk about, Jeff brought up the taxpayer survey. We did talk about doing a survey, if you remember, in April. And I determined that we just weren't going to have enough time to give you the information you would need in terms of to be able to make this decision. One option that we could have would be, we have focused, and many people have said focus on November. There are some different ideas that have come forward. One option that you could have would be to direct the administration to conduct that taxpayer tolerance survey. If we do that, that takes this November off the table. I just have to be clear. We are coming up against a point where we have to make some decisions about whether we're going to be on the ballot in November or not in terms of timing. But as many people have talked about, it's important to get it right. And if we needed to hear, if you felt as a board, we needed to hear more on that, that's something we could certainly do. the fact is that does cost money, right? So it's about a $15,000, $20,000 investment that we would have to make to be able to get that data. But that is one option. The next part would be asking us to take what you have said here and coalescing it into a recommendation. We've been asking for your opinion. We've been asking to hear where you're at. It's one of my jobs to be able to bring forward to you with our administrative team a recommendation based on what we've heard. So if I were to make a recommendation tonight based on what I heard, I would say that we'd be looking at coalescing around that maintenance, making sure that we're using that debt that is coming off. And to Jeff's point, we have to be we are always very clear with voters. If they were not, that their taxes potentially could go down if we don't approve any kind of renovation or update. So that is a possibility which we would clearly articulate to the voters. So the option would be one part that would look at that first $40 million around renovation. And then I really would say part of that renovation would include the science, technology, and fax labs, because that's career technical education that we have to make sure is updated to all the latest things that they need. And when we talk about renovation, to be really clear, we are talking about windows and painting and lights and all of those kinds of things that would also add to the instructional updating of the building, but not doing the kinds of modernization that we would be able to do with a second $40 million. That we'd be talking about things like removing certain classrooms to be able to create those flexible learning areas. In some cases, that potentially could mean something that Tom has said a number of times is about getting more volume in a space. So one component of renovation that could be done is looking at actually raising the canopy of a place like the cafeteria. You could actually raise the ceiling to give it more space within that area. That would be part of that second $40 million or so that would include be $20 to $40 million in terms of those, what I'm calling instructional updates. And then you have the question of the activities facilities. And Amy has suggested a potential pathway forward where you give, the voters the opportunity to weigh in on additional activity space, commonly referred to as a field house, which would current plan give us 4 additional courts. You could shave that a bit and you could say, what if we did 3 courts? And if we did 3 courts, which I do think we've heard clearly that 4 courts would be very helpful, but we also have to be practical that we want to make sure that we expand the space. You drop down to roughly 25% less cost on a building like that. If you were to go to 3 courts, that's an option that we could consider. And then Amy is the only person whom I heard from about ICE. And so I think to Tom's point, that first 60 or so million that I mentioned, that is all about the instructional space, right? That's all about the teaching and learning space, and including things like the cafeteria, which I would also say are that teaching and learning space. Then that second part, if we went down Amy's road of having a couple of additional questions where people could weigh in up or down on individualized facilities. So if you were to tell me I need you to make that would be my synthesis of that portion. I did hear a couple of people who had the interest of a little bit of a more forward pushing in terms of some more new space and some demolition of some space to use the existing building, but to add new. That is something that we certainly can look into. I think Sal did some estimation for us tonight. It's about 100 million. We'll have Sal come up and talk maybe just a little bit about her initial thoughts on that. I will be straight up with you, and I'm curious about Val's perspective on this too, is that I think that's a tall order for us to turn for November. I think that I do want to also, if Sal wants to come up to the podium so we can ask you questions. I do think the key thing is that we've been deliberate and we have put pressure on ourselves about November of 2022. There are lots of other options other than November of 22, including all the way out to November of 2024. So as we coalesce around what is the plan is important, as is the timing. And if as a board, you think that we want more time to do additional delineation on the plan, then I encourage you to say, let's take the additional time. If you are at a point where you feel that what I'm affectionately referring to as the 40 plus, and it could be 40 plus 1 or a couple of different questions, that is certainly within the realm of what we have discussed to this point. So I think that that's where we're really getting close to, is that if we are moving forward with some of these more common things that we've heard from board members, of course, the voters get to weigh in. We can do that this November. If we start to deviate from that, then I would encourage you to take some additional time If we take additional time, we could also do a taxpayer survey. But I do want to point out one thing, that if we had done a taxpayer survey when we suggested it and say potentially in April, I'm not convinced the results would be applicable, because in the last 6 weeks, we've seen some additional concern about the economic environment. So would the data that we have gotten in an early spring survey been something that would have been useful for us to be able to apply in November? So those are my thoughts, and I want to have Sal talk a little bit about this, the additional academic wing construction, and what your take on it would be to this point.
Sure. Thanks for having me again tonight. So I was asked to put together a cost estimate of that option, and certainly there's plenty of devil in the details to be thought about, but what that included for consideration today was demolition of the D, H, S, and M wings. So if you go around the counterclockwise, it goes H, D, S, M. And that would retain the V wing and the gymnasium area and things of that nature. I think you have some thought to put into if you would include the kitchen cafeteria and media center in that or not. You'd want to think about in a master plan where you would want the media center relative to the classrooms. And so while it's a functional space, does it stay? Does it go? So I included it in demolition just to be clean about it and really just keep auditorium, gyms, and those activity spaces. I ran a very quick space summary on how much space you would need to put back. And then I included the renovation of the locker rooms, the existing music area to be black box and health classrooms, the renovation of the V wing, certainly the storm shelter premium that you need to be cognizant of. And then the only remaining maintenance you would have at that time is really for that southern half of the building, right? For lack of better, if you imagine the cafeteria draw line and go south, that's down to about 15 million of maintenance. That does include the parking lot for the whole campus in it. So it's a little not totally fair to completely assign that to that part of the building. So very, like I said, kind of some quick budgeting that got to, I think, between 100 to 105 million would be a reasonable budget for that. And I would recommend that we work with the administration and especially the high school administration to make sure that every room we need is counted. So I was really going through and making sure we could make you whole again, but it would merit, because so much of it would be new, I think it would make sense to sit down and go actually room by room and make sure we have the right things. But I think it's a healthy number for consideration. And that did still include a 4-station field house. I should have said that. And Dr. Hillman was accurate. We believe that a 3-station field house would be about 3/4 the cost of a 4-station. So that was about 13.6 million. So. And I guess I thought I could do a little bit of timeline work too. So just to remind you all, the absolute last day to adopt a formal resolution and report to the county auditor is August 26th. I would say that would be cutting it quite close for the MDE submission for review and comment. They are allowed to take 60 days, and then you get a letter back from them, usually a 4-page letter that's either educationally recommended or not recommended. And that has to be published at least 20 days before the election. So that would be a minimum of 60 plus a minimum of 20 is 80. And that's cutting it down to the exact day. So I would typically say you wouldn't want to submit a review and comment any later than August. What day is election day? November 8th, August 8th. That would be the day I would recommend a review and comment is in at the commissioner. And it'd be nice before then, but. And they've been taking every day possible. So all of the August elections are about now publishing their letter. Another interesting thing I think you might want to know about is that early voting would begin on September 23rd. It starts 46 days before the election. And I'd be happy to review other election dates or timelines if anyone is interested. Or other questions.
Amy.
I was wondering if you could comment on cost savings by combining the hockey rink with the field house, and
Sure.
How would that work?
I would say there certainly could be some cost savings. I'll just make a caveat that we would want to think about all of the people that would be using your locker rooms, and if having hockey start share with all of your other winter sports would actually be feasible or not, right? Or, but in general, I think you could share concession stand. I think you could share locker rooms. You could share kind of meeting rooms or classrooms that could be staging for teams. Bathrooms, certainly, hallway, at a certain point, you start being a little more cost effective to share a boiler plant and to share a chiller, things of that nature. I would say would be in the maybe more like 1 million than multiple million. Just because hockey might still need some of their own locker rooms, but I think that's a fair assertion. I do think you should think about the impact to your campus from a green space perspective. Ice arenas are large footprint, and you're not a campus that has, an exorbitant number of fields. And so if there was a ice arena here, I think you would want to think about that. And then what that makes me think of is what the city would make you do for parking for an ice arena. If they would let you double count the same parking daytime, nighttime, or not. And I think before you proceeded with that, we'd want to get a somewhat definitive answer. Assembly spaces can just have a large parking demand, so.
And I think, Amy, as well, what I think would be, if that were to be part of any kind of discussion moving forward, part of that high level executive discussion with the city would be, if this is a pathway that we would go down, there would be some trading of spaces. So you would have, for certain, you'd have to lose at least the baseball fields, right? The varsity field and the 9th grade field for sure, potentially even the softball fields, possibly. And so the exchange would be that the city would probably need to take on all of those fields and have a plan for how they would do that, which really is the reverse of what we do right now, right? Right now, they take care of the ice arena, we take care in general of most of the other fields, but that I want to emphasize what Sal said about green space. We would lose a significant amount of green space on the high school campus in favor of this. So it's just a matter of weighing that part here.
Thank you. Other questions?
The only other thing I thought I might say is that I think this came up at the work session, but multi-question ballots are certainly allowable. They are generally advised to be stacking in nature. So kind of a base model, and then we could also do this and we could also do this. And there's been legal advice that having a question 1 that fixes it and a question 2 that demolishes it might not be approved as a question, because they're thought of as kind of voting on plan A or plan B. So I would just give you the advice that you would have to think carefully with some of these plans about, especially the kind of the hybrid plan, how you might, I don't know how to structure that into multiple questions at this moment. So.
And that's something that if that was a road the board did want us to go down, we would work very closely with bond attorney.
Absolutely.
able to help
Yeah,
us
I'm
with
not a
that.
lawyer.
You
But-
could be one of those.
Could have been.
We would certainly get the bond attorney's advice on how do you construct that kind of question, because you are doing both renovation and addition. And then what is the appropriate way to present that to the vote? And that's true with all of these. Remember, the reason that we asked you to keep high level tonight to think about the questions in this way is the board would, of course, eventually adopt whatever the specific technical language is. But that's not what our job here is tonight. We would take that as administrators. We would go to the bond council. We would say, here's what we're looking at doing. Please help us put it into the language that would be appropriate on the ballot. And there's a number of firms that would be able to help us with that. And actually you do that, even if the question is extremely simple, you still have the bond attorney
Absolutely.
to help you with that.
I do think the messaging of a question that would be in first question, we fix it, and second question, we tear it down, could be challenging with your public. It's good enough to fix, so approve that, but actually maybe it's not, so we should tear it down, right? So you have to think about, how would you explain it in the grocery store on Saturday when somebody asked you? So that'd be my other piece of advice.
Any other?
Not that it's an invalid idea. I mean to underscore that, but you would really want to think about by breaking it up into multiple questions, what are you actually saying to the taxpayers?
So if I can just make one more comment, that's okay. So we are at decision time. So this is the point where we have to make a call. And so I think that we don't make that call tonight. We did not, if we were in a different circumstance, we would have tried to have started this task force even earlier. As you know, we were playing multi-dimensional chess this winter with a pandemic, with a budget prioritization process, and this facility. We have gotten a lot done. So I do not feel badly one bit about where we are at. But for the November election, it is time to call the question. Not tonight, but between now, I don't think can wait until August 8th, because as Sal said, we'd have to submit the review and comment, which Sal would do that work for us, get it to MDE.
We'd bring it to you that evening, submit it the next morning, or what have you, is the typical, yep.
So I think there's really what I'm looking for some feedback here for what our administrative staff can do to support the board. So we can take what we heard you to say tonight, these different things, and we can craft a circumstance or a situation where we can help you formally make the decision. Tonight, we intended to keep this as discussion. This is important. This is millions of dollars. This is taxpayer investment in the school. You have taken this very seriously, as we should. We are not leaving any stone unturned. We can bring you a couple of different options for you to say, here are the different choices, because unlike a ballot initiative, we can give that to you here, right, in a board meeting. And then you can give us direction. And to me, it's really one of a few different options. It's one around this concept of 40 plus, and then the way we would formulate that for you would be, here are your options. How far do you want us to go? We'd facilitate you helping to vote on that. To how many questions would you want us to go with? The second option will be to say, let's pump the brakes. Let's get some additional data. Let's further evaluate a more hybridized option, right, in terms of that. Another option could be that you could say, this is what the plan is, but we're not quite ready to go in November. Those are really the three pathways that I see. Am I missing any pathways that other people see? To me, those are the three decision matrices or decision pathways that we have. So if the board is ready for us to be able to, I think you've had enough discussion. I think you've had a lot of opportunity to present your perspectives. I think hopefully I have characterized what you have said in a way that honors your comments. We would then need to look at a special meeting, right, to be able to make a determination. And so I think the logical time to do that would be July 25th, 2 weeks from tonight. We would do the work to have the recommendations for you to be able to bring that forward at that. And we could do it the 25th. We could do it. There's a number of different days we could do it. We could poll you as to what the best day to do it would be. But I do think that we should do that we should have a special meeting that last week in July, so that you can make a determination one way or the other moving ahead. And then we will take what you tell us to do, and we will do the best that we can. We will leave it all out on the field, and we will do everything we can to make it happen. I offer that just because we want to have clear direction about what we can do for you.
Okay, Tom.
I'm surprised. I haven't seen anything on social media. Northfield News had just a little bit on Facebook, and there have been no comments. I assume you've talked on KYMN about it,
That absolutely.
and nobody's spoken up, maybe because they haven't heard anything specific or any details. So it seems like we're operating with a lack of real community feedback, and the only community feedback is someone who had a plan similar to mine, and the only people who ever talked to me say we need to build a new school. So I don't, maybe we should postpone for 2 years and get more information. I mean, if we do it in a year and do it in an odd year election, well, I mean, the other thing is, in 2 years, you think things are messy now. In 2 years, it's going to be even worse. So as far as elections go, so it's 6 1 half dozen the other as far as the state of the election. But we don't seem to have a sense of what the community really wants. And I could line up people who would support me, and I'm sure others can line up people who would support them, but we just don't really seem to have a whole lot of information. And the other question I had was the task force. It was charged with looking at renovating, what the high school would need, what the needs are of to making the high school better functioning. There was no comparison. Well, what would a new school do? There was no head-to-head. It was, and there was no, at least my impression was that there was no, this is what we recommend. All it recommended, and it wasn't really a recommendation, was just, this is a list of things that needs to happen. So I think when we say we're following the task force recommendations, I think that's not quite an accurate statement. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that was my impression. So, well, I guess I just wanted to say that. So anyway, maybe we should hold off, or maybe Northfield News will publish something. We'll get some feedback, but right now it seems we're 6 or 7 people trying to figure out what the rest of the community is thinking. And we have 6 or 7 disparate opinions, so. And nothing that, well, at least no strong single opinion or purpose, vision that we want to pursue.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom.
just wanted, Tom is right. That was what the task force was charged with, was the renovation part. I want to be clear that he's right there.
On a spectrum
Yep, on a
to
spectrum.
pursue what could happen at a various tax impacts. But you're right, they did not hand us here's a signed sealed envelope of exactly what we think you should do. Correct.
Other comments?
And re-engaging the task force would be an option on a longer timeline, I think. So if it's important to.
Jeff?
So let me just throw this out here. Back when we were looking at the high school in 2017, what we were talking about is building a school where the baseball fields are. And then it take a couple years to build a school and then have do whatever you're going to do with the high school. And I'm just wondering, in your mind of, obviously if we have the high school, if we do a renovation and go that way, I see, as far as the gym, I see, because, right on the other side or right by the football field, that's where the proposed Y was going to go. That's about a, football field size. I mean, you could put 4 courts in there and a court, but I'm also wondering if in your mind, if that's where we were originally going to put, the high school, I mean, would it make sense to put in there? And I don't know how do you make more of a community center that's kind of wide open for the community in Northfield to do if you ever ended up doing a co-project together? That, yeah, you can have hockey in there and stuff, but you can also have a nice community center that you can just open to the people to use for a variety of different things. So obviously, we're pushing back on the land and we've got some other land things to get in there, but that, I don't know that if you could expand on, are there other places and what would a community center or something look like, if you've seen around or whatever, where you could use ice and you could also make that, part of, because that's what we talked about a long time ago with, what are you going to do with the high school portion of that? Well, if you tore it down for $4 to $6 million, you got nothing. But I'm just wondering, what would that, I mean, I'm throwing you on the spot, but what would that look like?
I think it's a pretty popular option to logically lay out a building or a site so that you can have a separate community entrance, and then it starts to become, your day-to-day operational choices about if you let the public come and go freely, if they have to get screened through the main office, do they get badges? But there's great examples of community centers attached to, I'll call them secondary buildings. One that comes to mind is West Tonka. I think it's technically a middle high school, a 712. They added a 3-station field house, has its own entrance, so it can be used by the high school during the day. And community members can get badges, for example. And I would guess that the ice arena, if that were to be on the same campus, would merit, being on that same part of the building and maybe having its own entrance. Then you just have to think about the interface between the two from a security perspective. Can people come and go freely all day? And what does that mean for daytime security and things like that?
And as we know, I mean, the location of the high school is a very popular area, and we're always talking too about safe routes for kids to get to and back to school. And I mean, obviously the high school where it is the closest to downtown and other parts. So
Sure.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Julie?
So I have a question. When I
Sure.
was looking at the high school information, it appears that we have around 17 million in facility maintenance needs over the next 0 to 2 years.
One moment. Sorry, mine's sorted alphabetically, so I have to
That's right.
quickly sort it by priority.
So Priority 1, immediate need was 1.5, and then
Sort by
priority 2 is 0 to 2 years, 17.3.
Priority, here we go. Okay, so you want priorities 1 and 2.
So I'm it
Yeah,
appears it's around 18 million. So if we don't do those
Correct.
maintenance needs in the next
18.8.
0 to 2 years, what is the downside to that? Is
So,
there a fact that will stop working and not have the building, being able to really run the way it should, or?
I think that's possible for some of the original HVAC, which is in the southern half of the building. So the music rooms, the gymnasium, things of that nature. And I think the phrase that Cole used last time that I liked the phrasing of is, in some cases, you're on borrowed time, so there'd be no guarantee. Certainly things are fixable, but at a certain point you start fixing things that probably really should be replaced. I do know that the operations and maintenance team has a lot of things that they would do if they knew what was going to happen. And in a state of limbo, they're kind of holding off, trying to figure out if it's going to be throwing good money after bad. So that would be the other thing I would think about. Most of the priority ones are code items that would only be triggered, so to speak, if you pulled a building permit. So like you are not required to improve accessibility unless you go pull a building permit, for example. And the building doesn't have fire code violations, so that's not really my concern. But yes, there is quite a bit of original to the building. So 60, 64, 65 HVAC and priority 2. I don't know if Val has any other thoughts about what else we might worry about. I mean, emergency repairs are not $0 a year at the high school.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else that
Yeah.
you didn't cover. Okay, other questions or comments? Go ahead, Julie.
So I appreciate how well you've really captured our thinking and really outlined for us, Dr. Hillman, what our decision-making needs to be. And I certainly appreciate that Tom has put a new thought in terms of the approach into the mix. And Amy, I don't think that your hockey plan is all that, it's a sound, you have a lot of sound reasoning for doing that. And to me, the field house was always going to be, if you're going to have, multiple questions, that to me was clearly a third question. And so I think if the board can support the plan to renovate, and we have the maintenance needs, and we have some other options of really updating the building and doing some needed updates, that I think we could look to a maintenance and update 2 question in November, and then maybe in 2024 have the ability to reassess the facility needs and maybe review something for 2024. So in 2022, just address the maintenance needs and the educational updates, and then move towards reviewing the athletic facility needs, and then possibly look at a way to incorporate the hockey if we can spend the time to really work with the city, and make that sort of a longer term approach to really address the high school right away. If we feel like the renovation plan is something we want to move forward with, then I'd say we move forward in November. If we want to take a step back and say, is there a renovation / new approach that we could take, that to me is going to take a longer runway. And if you're talking September 23, we really have to have that information to the voters almost as soon as we say we're doing this.
And I do think that that's a new thing too, that, we are right on the same target as we always would have been with deciding a bond referendum question. If you think this is the time of year that lots of boards decide for the November, but this is one of the first times where we've really seen that early voting have an impact in a fall election like this. This is fairly new. And so I think it's one of those things that more people now are voting early, right? More people are taking it. There was always the absentee, but just that switch from absentee to early voting, that concept, we are seeing more and more people take advantage of it. So we're right on the time frame you normally would be, but I think the rules are changing as we're playing the game.
Amy.
Well, I think that as long as we had the information to our voters right after Labor Day, I think most people aren't thinking about schools during the summer anyway. Summer goes by too fast. If they get it, if they had information in August, it's just going to go in a pile somewhere and get lost. So I think there would be a quick turnaround, but I think if we could get information by early September, we would be fine. I still think that my 4-tiered approach is the way to go because we're giving the choice to the voters and we're giving them 4 options. And I think we have intelligent voters. I think they can understand the issues and I think we can see how much our community can support. And also with, let's say, the field house and the hockey rink don't pass. Well, for the field house, we're sort of putting the community on notice that this is something we'd be interested in doing. And maybe it's not the right time for it. Maybe it's 4 years down the line or 8 years down the line, but they'll at least know that that's something that we would like to have to address both our high school needs and our community needs for more gym space. So I don't think there's any bad publicity there, including it. And if we get it, great. The hockey rink has an urgency to it. And I think we get a lot of credit for at least saying, we'll try to take on this problem. We'll try to see if we can get the community to agree. And if the community doesn't agree in 2022, then it's right back in the hands of City Hall and they have to figure out what to do with it. So, and Julie has.
The only question I have with that is
That's
the
an important
discussion
comment.
around where the space, where we could fit it, so.
It would be where there's green space or parking today, and I don't think you'd want to live with less parking. So you would definitely live with at least one fewer major field. I did want to make a comment there has been case studies of the Department of Education not approving what they would call activity centers that are detached from a school campus, not always, if you are not planning to reasonably use them during the day. Because they then say, how is this educationally advisable? So I think that that would be one thing that might be worth discussing with the MDE as well. So a couple of your peer districts have gotten negative review and comments, which does not mean you can't run the election, but it means you need to pass with a super majority. So I think the site of the ice arena is something that needs to be carefully considered.
Thanks,
Got
Sal.
another
That's sort of my concern is that, if we have this new broader thinking and this new approach, it's going to take a lot of time to really put that together. And I don't necessarily feel like I would be in a position to really understand and defend that moving forward in a referendum to really say, no, I really believe in this, because I feel like there's just too many details that would have to be worked out. I feel very good about maintenance and I feel good about the other educational aspects and improving our existing building that I think our community could get behind. I think when we start talking field house and hockey arena, it gets really messy. And I think that a longer runway to really determine how to best do that might be something I would more strongly support.
You, Julie. Any other questions or comments? You feel like you have a sense for what's next, or did you want to?
Yes, because we have to move forward. So what we will do is I'm going to take everything that I've heard tonight and we are going to provide you a menu of options that I will construct between Chair Claudia and I. We will set up a decision-making process for you. And that will be very clear. That will come down to, yes, this is what we're doing, or no, we're going to hold off for some additional. And first of all, we understand this is really good discussion. This is deep discussion because it is an important question that costs a lot of money. So we have to balance the sense of urgency that we need with parts of the building with some of the other things that we've been talking about. There's a number of, only the voters can tell us what the right pathway was, right? So I will take this back with our team. We will develop a suite of recommendations for you that you can, a suite of menu options that you could choose from. And then we will help you work. We will construct the decision-making process so we have an outcome. Sal, sorry.
Oh, no, keep going. And I'd just like to say something at the
So I
end.
think the key thing is that the latest I'm comfortable having that meeting is August 1st. So I'm going to be very practical and selfish that I don't get back from my vacation, which I've been looking forward to for a long time, until the 20th of July, which does not give me the appropriate amount of time to put together a good set of recommendations for the 25th. So I'm going to recommend two options, either one that we look at a special meeting on the evening of the 28th, or we look at a special meeting on the evening of August 1st. Those are the two options that I see that are available. So what I'd like to do is get from board members, which of those two options work for you? And then Anita will start to put together that special meeting plan. When I return from my time off, our team will finalize what the decision-making matrix is, and we're gonna move on from admiring the issue to making the determination about what is next. Does that seem fair to board members? Is that clear? I think we should just do it right now. Can people, is there a day of the 28th or the 1st that people cannot do?
I cannot do the 28th.
I cannot do the 28th.
Okay, can everyone do August 1st?
Yes.
There you go. August 1st it is.
Can
Not-
I ask one more question?
Yes.
In terms of positioning this and putting the package together, was there any consideration given, or is there any merit to a 25-year loan? Bond, 25-year bond versus 20? Do you know, if Ellers has some, I know our 40.2 was 20-year, but
In terms of how many
just
dollars?
reducing the impact to
And we
taxpayers.
can choose that at any point after the bond is, after we have approval.
Okay.
So that's not something we're necessarily locked into. I mean, we should have a reasonable estimate for what we would expect the impact to taxpayers be, but for all of the legal things we're required to do, but moving from 20 to 25 would reduce it. And so I don't anticipate that being a problem to change.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Amy?
Do you think you'll be able to have some initial discussions with the city about the hockey rink idea at all, for us to have some
Yes.
sense of what, if that partnership is even feasible?
Well, I think that the city has a vested interest in a partnership. So that's not a hard, it is a complicated question, right? So, but yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom.
So we don't legally need to select 20 or 25 years, but 20 years payments can be higher than 25. So like my mortgage is 30 years and not 15 for a reason, so I can afford something. And so that would impact someone's decision perhaps to vote on something. So it would be wise to choose that. And, you know, we've often refinanced if we go for 25 years and, you know, the economy goes up and down all the time and we can't get flustered over any instant. Can we refinance for a shorter period or anything, or?
I don't know that we've ever refinanced for a shorter period.
But I think you can, because I think when you go out for when you refinance, you redetermine what the terms of that bonding is. So I do think, I do want to say, as the person who would be leading along with some great members of my team here, 50+ meetings, and that will be what it will take. We will go forward with something that very clearly says, here's what the tax impact is. And then I will very much remind people that in the 2018 bond referendum, we delivered the exact same amount of space that we promised for approximately $2 million less impact to the taxpayers. So I think the important thing is once we get our plan and our financial pathway moving forward, we will deliver, because the past practice or our previous experience is the best predictor of future success. The team that you have here delivered in the midst of a pandemic, almost there was well over half of the construction of the new building was done during the pandemic, and we still came in on time and under what we had told the taxpayers we would. So when it comes to that, Tom, we will deliver on whatever it is that we say, we will deliver on it.
Well, yeah, I know, because we always do. But I think my point is that we've been able to refinance regularly to
Absolutely.
the benefit of the taxpayers. So if they're freaking out now that, you know, oh my gosh, my tax bill is going to go up $20 this month, well, maybe in a few years, you'll be seeing a break because of whatever. So.
We certainly will present, we can present to people during any kind of campaign, a history of our bond refinancing to show that we have saved the taxpayers, because that money, of course, does not come back to the district. That money goes right to the taxpayers.
Yep, there are statutory requirements, so I don't think that you are able to do a bond refunding for the first 10 years.
No.
There's, in statute, there's a bunch of rules about what you can and cannot do. And I think the only thing that I would encourage board members to just think about in those terms is the 20 or 25 years, I think really is dependent on what you're considering doing. If we're doing a massive renovation and really going to extend the life of the building, then I think 25 years is fine, because we're committing our taxes for that amount of time should we not refund, not refinance in the future. And that's what we're up against right now. We're fighting this tax impact and having the concern about asking about it because we still have these other things hanging out there from previous decisions that were made. So that would be my only thing just for board members to reflect on.
My final comment before we move on to the next, because I think we clearly have our orders. I think we're clear about what we have next. I don't want people to feel the pressure of the timeline to rush you into a decision, right, about what we do if you are not there. And so as you think toward that August 1st date, one of the options that you do have is to say, pump the brakes and let's talk about that. That is an option that we will be ready to present all of those other things. I just want you to have that in the back of your mind. I don't want you to feel pressured. There are some real advantages, of course, to a November 22 option. But again, we want to make sure that we have a plan that as we can get around to the best of our ability as we move ahead. So we will bring you multiple pathways for you to make that decision. But I also want you to know that nobody on our administrative team is going to feel let down if the board says, good effort, but we need more time. So we haven't talked about that a lot, right? And I want you to know that no one will be like, oh my goodness, we spent that. All of the time that we spent so far has been useful in helping us craft what the right plan forward is. So I just want, as you're deliberating about this and thinking about this, I want you to know that many people have said November 22 is a good time to go. I don't disagree. I think there's some good pieces there, but I think we should just make sure we think about that so that we're very thoughtful in executing whatever option it is that you suggest that we do.
Okay, thank you. Tom, you have a
Can I
comment?
just one quick comment? No, we think that 2017 might not be a good time to do it, but that's based on prior to early voting conditions. And so the effect of an odd year voting may be mitigated by the fact that there are early voting.
Talking about
opportunities.
23, Tom, not 2017.
Yeah,
You
sorry.
said 2017.
Oh,
I just
sorry.
wanted to clarify.
Oh my
That's
God,
okay. I think I knew what
But
you meant.
going
I wanted
back
to
in time,
clarify.
yes, 2023, sorry.
So August 1, 6 PM, a special meeting, and we will bring forward multiple pathways for you to make a selection. We will have a decision at the end of that meeting, one way or the other. Thank you, Sal Bagley, for your expert help. This is not an easy conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're moving on to the first reading of policies 527, 614, 711, and 712. If you have any comments or questions, you can put those forth right now. Okay, Julie.
So I have a question on policy 527 in terms of the student parking. And under item number 4A, it says students are permitted to park in a school district location as a matter of privilege and not of right. Students driving a vehicle may park their motor vehicle in parking lots designated for student parking. Would there be any merit to considering added with a valid parking permit? We don't indicate, we say you can park there, but we don't indicate anything around needing to have a parking permit. And I'm not sure if that's something that we really need to have in policy or if we want to think of, if there's any merit to adding with a valid parking permit.
So that's a great question, Julia. Well, just because there are parts of the campus. So for example, Rock Fields is an area where
Oh,
there's
you're right.
not a parking permit
Yep,
required,
okay.
is mine, you know, you
that
don't
is our
need to have
free
that parking
spot.
permit to pay to park there.
Okay, so yeah, that answers my question. My other question was on the search of, so the search is really around the motor vehicles, but I wondered, I looked in our transportation policy, if say a student was on the bus and saw something that another student had, and somehow would there ever be a need to search a student who had something on the bus before they would get off the bus? Say if a student was on a bus and was able to text someone and say, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here and this student has something, would a school official meet that student when they would get off the bus and do a search? Or is this just around motor vehicle?
Yeah, Julie, this particular policy is specific to the motor vehicles because of the unique situation where a motor vehicle is a privately owned item.
Okay.
Where they're parking. And so we do have other policies that cover the search of students that would be extended to the bus.
Okay.
So,
excellent.
yeah, this
That
one
makes sense.
specifically is around motor vehicles.
That makes sense. I did look on the transportation policies, but it would make sense then around specific student search. Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Any other questions on this policy? I have one on this policy. Letter B, a school resource officer may assist in the search of a student vehicle at the request of a school official. Is there, what is the follow-up on that if the school resource officer is assisting in that search? What's the follow-up on that?
So the clear component of that is that the school administrator needs to, the school administrator is the one who does the initial search. If they find a situation where they are not comfortable, they feel that they need more technical help, that is where they can invite the school resource officer to help or conduct the search for them. And then depending on the circumstance, that information will be given back to the school administrator, who would follow through on whatever the disciplinary components are for that, if there were any.
But if the school resource officer finds something that's in their jurisdiction, if you will, then they wouldn't be able to send it back to the administrator.
They would involve the administrator in what they found. And then if there were any other pieces that required their action, because you're right, they would have to take action based on that if they find it. Then they would be able to do so. We'll clarify that for you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on any of the policies or comments? Okay, this is a first reading, so we'll honor those again at the next meeting. Okay, we're going to have Val with an annual fundraising report as per policy 713. And then after your comments and questions, board members, Val will provide us with information about the proposed activity fee increase authorized by the budget prioritization process.
Thank you. So the fundraiser report, we did do one in January, I believe, and now this will be an annual kind of recap of the whole year. So I did include everything that you saw in January as well, just to have a cohesive annual report to be on that cycle now. And so you'll see a summary of the activity, the type of fundraiser, the purpose that they wrote on their form, what the intention of the fundraiser was. And then if it was like a product, they have typically sales and net profit. There are several where they're bagging groceries at Cub, and so they're just depositing the funds that were earned. There's no associated expenditures with that. And so overall, there were quite a few this year that were successful for our student activities, and I don't have any other specific highlights, but if you have any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Amy, you have a question?
This is not really a question, but it's just a comment that, and it's not on your work, it's on these fundraisers. I know many of these fundraisers I'd be happy to participate in, but I'm sort of out of the loop now that my daughter's graduated. So I'm wondering if there's any way that we can get the word out about the fundraising in like your weekly updates, or something, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are elementary school parents who would be happy to support the high school music department. And if there's any way that we can help let community members know that they can buy poinsettias, because I remember my daughter was in the music department and she sold poinsettias for years, and then all of a sudden she didn't. And I had people who wanted those poinsettias still. So if just having, and I actually posted it on Facebook this year, here's the page to order your poinsettias. To get that information out more broadly to help these groups even raise more money.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, we can definitely look at that and see about incorporating some updates and things that are kind of actively happening.
There was a similar, you made me remember a similar thought regarding activities around the district. And we had talked about even community members who don't have children at that site wanting that information. So there's a lot of interest.
I know the coupon books are very popular, and I had a nephew that sold me coupon books for years, and then I was out of the loop again. And then I was able to connect
I
with
think
somebody
they
else.
still have some coupon books there if you'd like. one.
Okay, but just know that there are people out there happy to support these groups if we just knew how.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Julie?
I would think that could be a good mission for our social media, just to put it out there and not make it necessarily something that we would, administration would have to take on, but that we could communicate to our social media team.
Good.
Anita's chuckling because we're the social media team.
No, I understand that. I'm just thinking in terms of really bringing it to, the board level is just really somehow figuring out if those teams can contact Eric at Nuger and have put the onus on them as another vehicle for getting their information out, not necessarily that you have to be the conduit to that, because that's my only concern is there's a lot on everyone's plate, and then to have to take on the marketing of our teams, that is something that I think they should take on. And there are really no one more proficient at social media than high school students and middle school students that are doing this work. So if, maybe that connection to Nuger and somehow having that, those guidelines for Eric to work within, it might be a way to, as I agree, that if we can raise more money, that's great, but not really take that on as our mission.
And I do think that with Bubba in the crowd here, we could just simply say that as I look at the list, all of these are obviously, most of them are athletic activities. And so there is an approval process for fundraisers. And part of that approval process couldn't simply include a document that is given to the coach or who's running the fundraiser to say, send an email and a photo to this address at nuger.com, and then they would prepare the posting for us. So, and that would also be beneficial to those teams because they would get some more traffic. So activities director Sullivan, we're going to add that to you here tonight.
Nice. Okay. Go ahead, Val.
All right, so we'll move on to the proposed activity fee increase. And coincidentally, this ended up being a great meeting for Bubba Sullivan to attend. I thought it would be a little unkind to ask him to present at the very first board meeting on his 11th day of work. So I worked primarily with Joel Olson on this, and this has taken a few different iterations. And so I'm going to walk through it, but I asked Mr. Sullivan to be here just if there were any questions that I couldn't answer that were a little more specific to activities. So as you know, part of the priority-based budget recommendation was to actually increase activity fees. I was looking back at my records, and I think the last time I could find that we formally increased fees was the last time we did budget reductions. And so I think we were definitely well due for an increase to make sure we're keeping up and supporting that balance with the general fund. And so the current proposal basically keeps the structure as it has been. There's no real significant change to that. It is a 14% increase for all activities across the board. We do have both, if you qualify for reduced lunch, there's a 60% discount. And if you qualify for free lunch, there's an 80% discount. And so those would be
the same. We're not recommending any change to that current structure. We would like to recommend adding a fee for strength training at the high school. This is not something that has typically had a fee, but for student athletes in their off season who participate in that, it is reasonable. The middle school fitness center does charge a fee, and so it feels important to add that in their off season. They would not be obviously charged a fee if they were already enrolled in a sport for that season. And then we are recommending a larger increase for speech. So speech, if you recall, when we revamped Schedule C during our last round of negotiations, was included on the State High School League sponsored activity list. And so the salaries and the coaching stipends and things associated with that are at a slightly higher level than they have been historically. And so just bringing that fee in line with some of the other ones that are in that same area. We did not bring it all the way up. We didn't want to obviously do a really significant jump because that's impactful for families. So we're sort of incrementally increasing that to match the other State High School League activities. And then the middle school fitness room also had a slightly larger increase. That's been $25 per season, I believe. And so we were just increasing that to match the other middle school activity fees to be more consistent. So I included the entire list of activities and what the rate currently is and what it will be. The average increase for high school activities is an increase of about $24 per activity, and the average for middle school would be about 11. And we are also recommending an increase to the family cap from $605 to $700. And really this range is intended to, if you have multiple students or they're playing multiple, or they're in multiple activities, that each family would pay for 3 to 4 activities, which feels like a fairly reasonable range and is consistent with what we had prior to this increase. This does calculate out to roughly 60,000 of additional revenue. Obviously, the assumption is that participation would be the same as it was this year. That is obviously a variable in this calculation, but we also know I did this calculation based on everybody paying the full amount, which we know is not the case. And so there's a buffer in there based on the historical percentage that we've seen. So that is kind of the summary. If you have specific questions, myself or Mr. Sullivan are happy to answer them.
Tom.
So when was the last increase? What year? You said?
2012.
So it's 10 years and it's gone up $24. So it's $2.50 a year. You know, one of the things we get caught in is like with school lunches or whatever is all of a sudden we have these big jumps.
Yep.
Would I be wiser to change our philosophy to maybe more incremental, like $5 every 2 years would be the equivalent, and you know, just otherwise it's the people who were using it at the low cost now the new people are paying for that, and it, you know, it just seems more fair to spread it out evenly on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good comment. Amy.
When do we start collecting these fees for the fall?
In theory, I believe enrollment would open August 1st.
Okay, I was wondering about that. So my question is, I know this was something we would probably vote on at the next meeting, but it sounds like if this seems like it's good to everyone, that it might make sense to move it up. Would that be something you would be interested in?
That would be
doing?
incredibly helpful, but we do have a plan should that not be the case.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to move that we make this action item for this meeting.
Okay, second by Julie. Okay, so we will move that to items for individual action towards the end of the meeting.
You'll have to take a quick vote to move it. We have a motion and a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Julie. Any further questions or comments? Julie.
I appreciate Tom's comments too, and I appreciate the work that you did, Val, and I really think that these are reasonable increases. And I think we also have a extremely generous and active booster club that does help students who are at free and reduced to offset their own individual fees. So we have that ongoing support from the booster club, which we appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'd like to welcome your new job, Bubba. And I think that looking at the fees and some of the other things that we haven't, done, I do like Tom's idea of trying to be, more incremental over time. I think it's very, justified at this time that we get moving on this right away.
Any more comments, questions? Okay, then we will move on. Thank you, Val. Okay, so Val, you'll now be presenting an update on the financial forecast.
Yes. Thanks, Bubba. So I'm going to do a brief interim financial forecast. This is out of our normal cycle, but with the priority-based budget process and the economic and market pressures that we've seen, I felt it was important, especially after presenting the general fund budget, just to update things to the best of my ability and just kind of make sure that you are up to date at where I feel the budget is headed, where we're headed as a district. I just would much rather have you be informed and not surprised by anything that comes in the coming year. So with the timing of the pandemic, I will say was unfortunate and fortunate for different regards, but it obviously put an additional strain on our budget, but it also timing wise happened when our enrollment turned from steadily increasing or at least staying even to declining. And so the federal funds have really helped support that transition. And we've been able to manage those in a way that I feel proud of to make sure that we are providing budget stabilization, which is one of the intended funds or purposes of that. But it is also, I will say, providing what I feel is like an artificial Band-Aid. They are temporary. And we know that after 24, it is unlikely that we will have any additional support in that same amount and structure that we've seen. So the declining enrollment and the inflation really are going to continue requiring us to make adjustments. I struggle to say that after we just went through $4.5 million over 2 years. And I gave some very specific examples in my document that I'll get to, but the declining enrollment is, I would say, escalating a little faster than I had originally anticipated in my projections, which obviously is compounding this, what we're experiencing. And I included this document in my narrative that shows our total migration. So this is one of the graphs that I have in our enrollment projection model. And the first couple of years, you can see if you're looking at the darkest blue line, if you have the color copy in front of you, or it's the line to the very left in each section, is really our net migration change. So of all of the students that left, came to the district, transferred around or did anything, that's, so in 16-17, that very first year, we gained 66 students from the year before. So we had 66 additional students generating revenue than the year before. The other two bars are how many graduating seniors we had versus kindergarten students coming in. That is basically negative in almost all of the, I think in every single one of them, because we always have a larger graduating class than kindergarten class because of our relationship with the charter school. and the other options that students have in here. And then the other bar is all the rest of the changes. So any student that came in, went out, that's the net migration. So the reason I chose to share this with you tonight is because it very clearly shows that we were tapering down where we had 66, 49, 4, and then we jumped down and now we are declining. And I think it's very apparent in the 2020-21 year that there was a pandemic. We were down 119 students from the year before, which we knew and we talked about, but the rebound or escalation of the declining enrollment, I think we rebounded from the pandemic, from the kids that we saw leave for other options. That part has rebounded, but the actual just declining enrollment because of housing and other factors in Northfield is at a rate slightly higher than I had originally anticipated. So for 21-22, we're down 71 students based on the last Mars calculation. We're projected to be down 58 students. 23-24 is a slight anomaly where we're up 8, but really not increasing. And so you can see those are big numbers. A 71 student decrease is more than $700,000 of revenue. And we are not decreasing expenditures at a rate that quickly. And so 71 students across 13 grade levels doesn't equate nicely to, 7 FTE somewhere. It doesn't align that way. And so we will continue to monitor this and make sure that we're recommending a budget that will help address some of this. But the inflation and the market disruptions is really the part that I'm getting concerned about. And so I wanted you to know that I'm concerned about it. We always buy bulk paper in June for the coming year. It historically has saved us probably almost 40% from when we just had buildings buying it on their own. Just from last summer when we purchased to this June, the white paper, buying it in pallets, increased 30% from last year. Colored paper increased 160% per pallet. We chose not to buy that in bulk because I was concerned about putting an amount in buildings' discretionary budgets that were already cut. Their discretionary budgets were reduced 37% this year. And I wanted them to be able to make their own choices about how to manage those dollars and whether or not color paper was a priority for their building. Our fuel, we've had a few conversations about the fuel clause. It's written in at $2.75 a gallon, which is a pretty average amount if you compare across transportation contracts. There are some districts that have a much lower, there are a few that have higher. So for September, we paid $63.76 to Benjamin Bus for fuel. And historically, it's ranged in that it's not really been anything we've been concerned about. But you're all well aware of where fuel is at right now. In January, that cost the district $35.84.19. And in the month of May, it was $12,736. So if you extrapolate that and assume we're going to pay that $12,000 if gas does not come down, that's an additional $114,000 in fiscal 23 that I can tell you for sure I didn't budget enough of an increase for. And so natural gas is the other big one, and that is a combo. It is my understanding that the bulk of this increase is more directly related to the really cold winter we had and how they calculate that. I'm not going to pretend to understand, but people who are smarter than me have said that that's the case and that this is legit. But the cost of gas, you can see, was 23 cents per therm. This past May, it was almost 54 cents. And had a pricing event surcharge. I'm not even sure what that means, but it is on our bill from Excel. And so overall, that's 176% increase. And I put the actual dollar totals in there so you could see what types of dollars we're talking about. I like to frame this for myself as roughly $100,000 is one teaching FTE. And just in these examples alone, we're talking about more than $300,000. And so these are 3 examples. The district clearly purchases all kinds of things throughout the year from a variety of vendors. And so my team is working on kind of a education campaign for staff to say, what are some stewardship opportunities? How can we control printing and color paper usage? And we'll provide some opportunities. I'm anticipating sharing some discounts or things when we find that there's good deals for school supplies or things that we know that our staff are already purchasing or intend to purchase. And so those are just kind of a frame of what's happening. And then the next 2 pages has an slightly updated financial forecast in the model that I've typically presented it. So you can see I've included the 14% fund balance goal. The pupil unit value, that second row, is actually the basic per pupil formula. I neglected to update the label, so I apologize about that. And so we know we're getting a 2% increase for fiscal 23. We're in the second year of the biennium right now. And then we have forecasted a 1% increase, which I don't think is unreasonable given the circumstances that we're in with the state. And so I think the biggest things to note on this are in fiscal 25, the property tax amount decreases, and that is because our capital projects levy expires in 24. And so beginning with fiscal 25, should we not renew that or not pass it, that is 750,000 of revenue that just disappears. I did not reduce the expenditures in this financial forecast by 750,000 because we primarily pay for our iPad and laptop lease payments out of that. And that is not something that I see us just abandoning. They're pretty important in our day-to-day operations. And so that is just something to be aware of in that future outlook. Now, if we do go out for a referendum and it passes, that obviously looks a little different in the future. I think for me, the most striking is the state revenue. If you just read across those numbers, those are not large increases. That is 70% of our budget is that number alone. And when we're declining enrollment and getting minimal increases, we're talking about in some years an additional $300,000 to go across the entire district. And that is not sustainable. I do have the federal funds in there through 2024. Obviously, we're anticipating using the majority of it in this coming year. You can see that's at 4.4. But there is still some in 2024 that we would be using and spending down, but I believe all of them expire in 2024 at the latest. And then the other local is really the fees, donations, and all of those things that we get. There's probably every other year you can kind of see a bump, and that is really because we're on an every other year cycle of selling devices. And so that has ranged from $100,000 to $300,000 depending on what we're selling. And so that's factored in as additional revenue in those years. Expenditures are obviously very challenging to forecast because not only am I forecasting inflationary percentages, I'm also trying to take out the federal dollars and where those are being supported. And so there's lots of things that I feel like look slightly confusing in the expenditures, and it's because some of the numbers are going up, but then we're taking a large chunk of salaries out that are being paid for with one-time federal funds. And so that's why it maybe looks a little, it's fluctuating with the federal funds, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The benefits, obviously, we know we're working through what our self-insurance is going to look like. And so that's a big factor included in there. And then the other, again, there's federal funds included in that as well. There's capital projects that are included in that as well. So that can go up and down depending on the year you're looking at. But at the end of the day, it still appears that we're deficit spending after all of the work that we have done. So I really can't emphasize enough the market pressures and the federal funds going away and the impact that's going to have. We can subsidize some of this in the meantime, but long-term, this is not a sustainable model. The bottom of that first page has the end of year. So it says EOY APU in our much beloved acronyms in school finance. So end of year APU is our weighted average pupil unit, so it's that weighted calculation that we earn. So you can see what we're expecting for students. But really the second page there with, it's the fourth page, I guess, but the second page of the actual graph of numbers includes the fund balance summary and where that is at. And so I did update fiscal 22 based on how I'm anticipating the audit to land. That is highly unusual for me. There are a lot of moving pieces at year end, and I typically would not update that. I went through pretty methodically, so don't lock those numbers in. I was very clear with Dr. Hillman not to lock those numbers in because the audit is the final numbers, but that is my best guess as of today of where I think we're going to land for this year. And I'm still projecting at the end of next year to be just above our new fund balance goal, which I'm not pleased to share with you, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat it. And so we will obviously, once we have the audit results and enrollment for the fall, we'll see where we're at and provide you another update in the fall. But I wanted to just be very transparent and upfront with you about what I was projecting, just so you were aware. So if you have any questions, I can try and answer them. There's a lot happening on these 4 pages, but I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Val. Very thorough and sobering report. Any questions, Tom?
Questions and a few comments. Maybe it's time to invest in electric buses.
I actually have several emails from the MPCA and a few other organizations. Excel, they actually have several grant programs that Benjamin Bus is interested in looking at.
I just want to point out, I had a long conversation with John Benjamin far before the fuel costs went up. And Benjamin buses, they are actively seeking how they could modernize that. There's a lot of things that have, just think about right now, it's about an 8-week wait just to get your home charging system put in. Imagine trying to do that for the fleet of buses. So there's some pressure on it now, but that's a long-term solution because of course, some of these issues aren't going to go away, but Benjamin Bus, I think if they could do it tomorrow, they would. And regardless of the fuel cost piece, I think that they look at this as the future.
Yeah. I hate to even say this, but geez, if we had a new building, we could put geothermal in and that might, help with that 176% increase. But the other question is you compared that to May of 2021, which may not be a fair comparison. What about like do you know what the cost of gas was in like 2019? Because the last couple of years have been a little wacky.
Yeah, I can look it up. I was mostly using a year comparison to show that's the data I budget on, right? And
Yeah.
so I look at a historical, but the utilities are more challenging to look at historical because of that. And so I tend to look at kind of where we're, what happened in the last year for utilities. So,
Yeah.
but I can look it up and share that. with
No,
you.
I was just curious. It's maybe not always the best to look at the last year or two because things, I mean, we were all complaining about the price of gas back when it was $1.40 a gallon and nobody was driving, but in reality, it's up and not that much. And then, so we don't have firm enrollment numbers yet, right? I mean, you're predicting or projecting for fall, but I mean, they could vary by 100 potentially or something, but. Right.
Yep, I would say it's difficult, especially during the summer to predict enrollment for the fall. I think the elementaries have, a sense of where they're gonna be, but there is always a surge in August when people remember that they have to send their kids back to school, that they have to actually fill out forms and things to make that happen. And so we always have that kind of, August, early September shuffle where there's kids coming and going. They move and they don't tell us. So it's not always an influx. Sometimes we also have students that actually left and just didn't tell us. And so there is that, but that is the projection, and I called it a projection for a reason. So, and we'll update, we always bring, the enrollment reports once
Right,
we get
yeah.
that rolling. And so I think one of the things that might be beneficial is to add what was budgeted as projected enrollment as a comparison to kind of where that's falling.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Good. Julie?
I just want to thank Val for the report. And I know you pride yourself on projecting and always being on the numbers, but there's no way that you could have predicted these kind of increases. And I just really value your transparency and how thorough you are. And I think these are really good examples to share with the community, and everyone understands it. And I think, again, I'm just really proud of how transparent our district is and how seriously you take financial stewardship and transparency. And I thank you for this report. I know it was difficult to deliver, but it's in certainly no way a reflection of anything you have done. So thank you for your great work.
Thank you.
Noel, did you have a question?
Thank you, Val. Excellent report, and I second exactly what Julie said. Transparent in every way, and you can't cook the numbers. That's the way it is.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And thank you, Val, for that. And it did make me think how important our LAC, our Legislative Action Committee, is to spread that message. And like Julie said, the community understands this. It's just a matter of putting that in front and having everybody working on the same team to advocate for our funding. Yep. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, we are moving on to my summary of the superintendent's annual performance appraisal. It is long, and the reason it's long is because there's much praise to give and much accolades, and we're just so lucky to have you, Dr. Hillman. So I was debating reading parts of the report. I'm gonna go ahead and read the whole report, and I know it's in the packet there, so bear with me. So for this review period, all 7 board members completed the annual performance appraisal. The evaluation covers all facets of the superintendent's job responsibilities. Board members provided numeric ratings on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being low and 5 being high, for 45 job responsibilities organized around 8 major topics. In addition to completing the numeric ratings, board members provided additional comments. And this is for the appraisal period of July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. I did meet with Dr. Hillman beforehand, and we went over the review. Dr. Hillman received an outstanding appraisal, achieving an overall rating of 4.93 out of 5. Board members provided numerous narrative comments that supported their findings, and I used those to build the report. There were many great comments, and I also had some comments myself. Collectively, board members cited his exceptional work around 3 key areas and also his outstanding leadership in an ongoing pandemic. During the pandemic, some comments on August 9th, 2021, at the recommendation of Superintendent Hillman, the school board passed the COVID-19 safety protocols for the 2021-22 school year, which included district-wide masking and quarantine procedures. What followed was months of engagement with community members, both in praise and complaint of student masking. Dr. Hillman responded to every email, invited stakeholders to in-person meetings, and supported his staff as they worked with mass students and their parents on both sides of that issue. He continued to update the district COVID dashboard, keeping abreast of the newest Minnesota Department of Health recommendations for schools. Additionally, Dr. Hillman formed the incident command team, which included a local epidemiologist, representation from the District Youth Council, and other stakeholders to advise him on ongoing COVID issues and updates. Besides supporting stakeholders, Dr. Hillman and Director of Finance Val Murdersdorf dedicated significant time to managing COVID funding. They also secured a state grant to open a testing site at the district office and hired a dedicated staff member to run the clinic. One board member summarized it well. The pandemic was in many ways all-consuming, affecting every area of education and highlighting Dr. Hillman's strengths in community relations, collaboration, and communication. Of note is that Dr. Hillman managed to superbly handle all his regular responsibilities while at the same time captaining the school district through the COVID-19 storm. The three areas I will now highlight are Goal 1 pertaining to the updated strategic plan, Goal 2 on the prioritized budget, and finally, community relations. Regarding Goal 1, the superintendent will facilitate an inclusive process that will result in the presentation of an updated strategic plan to the board by November 30th, 2021. Recognizing that the district's strategic plan had not been updated since 2016, and more importantly, that it could be used to align the district's budget, Dr. Hillman began a process of listening to stakeholders. He held a number of listening sessions, including one held outside and another held in Spanish. After collecting the community's priorities, Dr. Hillman presented to the board a draft document that included benchmarks from Northfield Promise, which the district helped develop years prior. In an exceptionally productive work session, Dr. Hillman's strengths were again highlighted. He connected with the community in various ways to hear them and bring their priorities to the board, thus helping us be prepared to update the strategic plan. In a collaborative act, Dr. Hillman conducted a work session that allowed board members to refine the mission and vision of the district, and in doing so, set us up to tackle the next biggest challenge, the district budget. With the new strategic plan in place, Dr. Hillman was able to keep that in front of over 70 community members as they recommended what programs needed to be prioritized instead of looking for what programs to cut. Dr. Hillman's excellent leadership and outstanding communication resulted in an updated and valuable strategic plan, as one member recapped. On Goal 2, the superintendent will create an inclusive process to develop a five-year funding priority plan presented to the board by March 14, 2022. The work of prioritizing the district budget was delayed a year due to COVID-19, but of note, the prioritization could be delayed due to the excellent stewardship, effort, and wise use of COVID-19 funds handled by Dr. Hillman and his staff. Once the date was set, Dr. Hillman invited everyone in the community to sign up for one of three committees, which would look at a particular budget package. Using the new strategic plan, members determined what programs could be given budget priority. This process of valuing all programs enabled an empathetic approach to be utilized in one of the most painful processes a district has to do, that is to let go of valuable programming and qualified staff. With the help of over 70 community members, the board was given an organized plan to sift through and consider further public comment right up to the last moments before voting on a new prioritized budget. Dr. Hillman's strengths in communication, preparation, fiscal stewardship, and empathy were in the spotlight once again. He masterfully led our community to make difficult decisions that saw valuable programs such as the EL program and world languages lose teachers and classes. Thanks to Director Murdersdorf and Dr. Hillman's leadership, our district will remain a strong district offering a quality education to our children for years to come. Even as enrollment drops, as we just heard, and state funding becomes less predictable. As one board member stated, his approach to a budget prioritization process versus a budget reduction process was an innovative approach. The community open forum format was excellent and participants felt that they were heard and their voices mattered. Another board member summed it up perfectly. Dr. Hillman is the most proficient superintendent I have worked with. And then the third area to highlight is community relations, which was also highlighted during the mid-eval. And that is because this is one of you have many strengths, and this is one of top strengths. Dr. Hillman respects the need to keep all stakeholders informed and to learn from them too. His ability to listen, include, and act on stakeholders' comments and recommendations is one aspect of the community relations. He understands the value of transparent communication. Dr. Hillman's leadership style is known community-wide and is respected by outside organizations. He recently received the Northfield Human Rights Award and was elected to be president of his professional association, Minnesota Association of School Administrators. As a member of local organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary, Dr. Hillman continues to advocate and represent the school district citywide in person and on a regular show on their local radio station, KYMN. Beyond the community, Dr. Hillman has also cultivated relationships with other nonprofits, city officials, other superintendents, and state legislators, whom he can call on to advocate on behalf of the district. As a product of his advocacy this year, Dr. Hillman also facilitated a legislative action committee, which included community members. He trained the members, along with the help of 3 board members, to actively engage legislators and the community with the message to fund public education. Lastly, the staff and community surveys came back with positive reviews for Dr. Hillman. As a board, we can rest easy knowing he has the full support of all stakeholders, be they students, parents, or staff. We are truly privileged to have Dr. Hillman as our superintendent. In conclusion, Dr. Hillman does not cease to deliver year in, year out. He cares about his staff. He connects to students. He works with parents and guardians. He advocates at the city and state level. He serves in and out of the district and is recognized for his efforts and respected citywide. This outstanding annual appraisal is evidence of his strong leadership and the board's full confidence in him. Thank you so much. So appreciate you.
So I'm just very grateful and privileged to do this work in this place at this time with all of you. I think the first piece of success is having clear direction, and the board has provided us with clear direction. And then, of course, you don't do it alone. And of course, I wouldn't be able to make it through half the day without Anita Ozzie. So Anita is a big part of the success that was reported in this document. And then, of course, you hear from Val all the time and the rest of our team members. Everyone who works in the district allows me to be successful. And I'm truly grateful for your positive feedback, and just know that I do not take the confidence nor the trust of the board for granted. And I will continue to work as hard as I can every day to earn that trust from you, from our staff, from the community, and from our students. So I thank you for this very positive feedback and the specific feedback that you gave me. And let's roll up our sleeves and get after it for another 3 years here. Thank you.
Very nice. Board members, if you want to add additional comments, you can now, or you know where to find Dr. Hillman if you want to speak to him privately. Okay, very good. Then we will move on to, let's see, I think they're at the, yeah. We're moving on to the consent agenda.
I think we have one more report.
Oh, we do. Yes, we do. Thank you. This is your district operations report.
Yes, we will be brief here, and I'm very pleased to share for the first time in quite some time. Actually, for the first time since we've been giving this report for over 2 years, we do not have the word COVID in the title. And we hope we're not poking the bear with that one. But this is the operations and strategic plan update. You're going to see at each meeting, I'll share a few vignettes of ways that we are trying to meet the district's strategic plan, the vision, commitments, and benchmarks. I already took care of one of these items with the appointment of Mr. Byer as Northfield High School principal. We took care of that and shared that during the announcement, so I'll dispense with that. I do want to share with you that Northfield School District did win a competitive multi-tiered systems of support grant that is anticipated to bring $237,000 per year for 2 years to support developing systems that will help every student achieve the district strategic plan benchmarks. We are one of 12 districts through the state to win that grant funding. We have had a team of around 23 people who've attended count them, 6 Zoom sessions that we were required to attend by MD. Not all of those 23 people could attend every session, but it's an intense training piece and planning piece for the district. And so we're working in those teams led by Carrie Duba and by Hope Langston to prepare for implementing the grant. And I listed the items that will be supported, including someone at a 0.5 that's actually, we are using this funding to offset a general fund expenditure for a position that already exists, and that position will be charged with coordinating MTSS. That's in our instructional services department. That's Carrie Duba, one of our instructional coaches. It includes things like substitute teaching costs, training outside the contract day for educational assistants and for other folks, more letters training, as we've talked about before, some contracted systems to continue to use and prioritize how we use data, and including doing some dashboards through a system called 5 Lab that we have, social emotional intervention training. And then we are able to include some meals for family engagement, other input sessions to encourage families to participate. And that's all through the grant. So I really want to thank Hope Langston, Carrie Duba, and the team, including Val Murderstorff on the budget side, who put this grant together. It's a competitive grant. It just goes to show that we continue to make sure we find external funding to be able to pay for the priorities in our strategic plan. And you see that I've tied that to the commitments of people, learner outcomes, equity, and stewardship. The final item that I have to highlight for you this evening is our spring work teams. So I'll be providing a more full report on our parent satisfaction and employee engagement surveys in an upcoming meeting. But one of the things that we continue to work very hard at is one of our lower indicators from our employee engagement survey is about how we are able to involve employees in the decisions that affect their day-to-day work. And of course, we have over 600 employees. We can't do a show of hands. That just doesn't work that way. So we started last summer working through this work team approach that has really proven to be very successful. It's designed to empower staff members to help us solve complex issues that face the district. The key things are we define what is the problem we're trying to solve. We make sure that staff members these teams have the representation across the staff to effectively solve the problem. As administration, we have to give them parameters to be able to make sure that as they're working toward a solution, that they are within the same few city blocks as what the administration would be in terms of thinking through that. What do they have to produce? It's not an admiration of the problem session. It is, here is a deliverable that you need to produce. And then we also share with each of those teams what is the amount that each of those work teams is going to cost the district. We are trying to really further define that. If we're bringing people together to meet, here's what it costs us to actually bring you together, what costs the taxpayer to bring you together to help solve this problem. We have really found that staff members are energized by that they are making sure that, oh, we have to use this time very well. So that's another component that we added. Staff have to apply to be part of a work team. And then we make selections based on a variety of criteria, specifically, what is the work team about? Do we have the appropriate balance throughout the system, et cetera? This spring, we had 3 work teams that were working to address the issue to reboot our professional learning community approach. And I highlighted that in the report. You can notice the number of people who participated in that session. We have a parent and teacher communication team that was facilitated by Sarah Pratt. Hope Langston facilitated the PLC team. Sarah Pratt, our assistant director of special education. I do want to point this one specifically to board members. We are using a parent communication process through parent teacher conferences that easily dates back almost 100 years. And so in a modern society, we should modernize how we communicate and engage with families. So you are going to see less emphasis on what I would consider to be traditional parent teacher conferences. There will still be things that look like that, but it will be more focused on what we'll call touch points and how are we making sure that we have a regular ongoing conversation with families. And so we're making a huge headway this year with that. There will be more tweaking as we go along, but that's important. And then also the pre-service workshop week schedule. That workshop week is intended to get the school year up and running. And after getting some appropriately critical feedback at the end of last year's workshop, we determined to invest and make sure that we had a broad range of stakeholders who are helping us plan that, again, with parameters about what are the things that need to get done. So what you'll see is that coming up on, we met on June 15th to take a look at those recommendations of those work teams as an administrative team. We'll be getting together again on July 20th to further operationalizing those pieces. There are also some work teams happening this summer that we can report to you later on, one about K-5 math, one on K-5 reading, and another that will be focused on standards of excellence that will be expected of all district employees beginning in the fall. So we're very excited about that work team process. We think it's a great way to elevate and amplify our employees' voice in big decisions and processes that make a difference to them. So that is my report for this evening. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Nice. Oh, yes, Julie.
The work team approach is really intriguing, and I'm wondering, is that something out of Studer education, or where was the inspiration for this approach?
So the inspiration absolutely comes from our continuous improvement work that we've been working with Studer Education on, but that's is not one of their tools. We use one of their tools to determine the approach, which is what was one of our lowest rated survey items.
Okay.
What would we ideate how we could potentially solve that item? And then we try something, we plan, then we do, and we study it. Has it been making a difference? We've gotten great feedback from folks about it from this past year, and then we adjust. So we developed it using the tools that we learned in our continuous improvement process, but we developed our own tool from it.
It's really excellent. Thank you.
I had a question about the parent-teacher communication.
Yes.
Whatever changes come out of that or updates or ideas, will those be implemented for this school year?
Yes.
Wow, that's terrific.
Yep. And so we'll, in the beginning of August, as we start to make sure that we're going to be letting families, reminding them about family conferences coming up very soon. But then early August, as people start to turn back to the beginning of the school year, we're going to be talking about how we're going to try some different things this year and understand that some approaches will work better than others, but we're intent on making that process better.
That's terrific. Okay, nice. Another question, comment, Julie?
I just had one other quick question about the MTSS grant, 237,000 from MD. Do you know if that's American Rescue Plan funds, or is there any potential that that could be ongoing past 2 years?
It was a competitive state grant, so it is not ARP funded.
Okay.
And so it was actually designated by the legislature, is my understanding.
Great, thank you.
Nice. Okay, now we're on to the consent agenda. As a reminder, there was some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Noel, second by Amy. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, items for individual action. We do have 2 resolutions with a roll call vote and 3 items plus the increase in fees. First, we have the policy committee recommendations. I'll take a motion, then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the coaches, early childhood family education, hand in hand, high school, kid ventures, and Portage secondary handbooks for the school year 2022-2023? Moved by Amy, second by Julie. Okay, Dr. Hellman, any comments ahead of the discussion?
I think we talked about those at the last meeting.
And then board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, a request to hire an additional non-licensed special education staff. Is there a motion to approve the request to hire 1 child-specific special educational assistant, personal care assistant at 6.75 hours per day at a projected cost of salary and benefits of $31,000 with approximately 55% of the salary reimbursed through special education revenue for a net cost of $22,606. Moved by Tom, second by Amy. Okay, any comments or questions ahead? No? Okay, board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. The next item is a resolution, so Anita will facilitate a roll call vote. I'll take a motion and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the resolution regarding Columbus Day as stated in your packet? Is there a move by Julie, second by Jeff? Okay, any comments or questions?
I think just to clarify, this is allowing us to hold our school board meeting on the federal holiday designated as Christopher Columbus Day on October 10th.
So seeing no comments, then Anita, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Roniak,
Aye.
Gurwitz, Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Purnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Okay, thank you. Resolution passes. Now we have another resolution, the designation of identified official with authority for the MDE External User Access Recertification System. Is there a motion to approve this resolution that authorizes Dr. Matthew Hellman to act as the identified official with authority and Christine Nessett to act as the Iowa to add and remove names only for the Northfield Public School 065901. Moved by Amy, second by Tom. Thank you. Do you want to make any comments? No?
Nope.
Okay, any questions, board members, or comments? Okay, seeing none, then we have a motion and a second, and Anita will conduct the roll call vote.
Roniak,
Aye.
Gurwitz, Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Purnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Okay, the resolution passes. You're the Iowa.
Thank you.
Okay, and then finally tonight,
She's working on it.
for the activity fees. Okay, yeah.
She's doing-
Finally tonight, we have an item added, which is the increase in activity fees. Is there a motion to increase the activity fees as authorized during the budget prioritization process? Moved by Jeff, second by Amy? Tom? Second by Tom. And we did have a discussion. Are there further questions or comments to be made on that increase? Okay, thank you for bringing that up, Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, and now we have items for information, and that is the filing for school board is August 2nd through the 16th at the district office. There is a $2 filing fee prior to 5 o'clock on Tuesday, August 16th, 2022. Our future meetings include a special meeting August 1st,
6 p.m.
6 p.m. here.
here.
Okay, and then August 8th is a regular meeting, August 22nd is a regular meeting, September 12th, all of those 6 p.m. in this boardroom district office. Is there a motion? Oh,
We
sorry.
just did get some information that Julie had asked for that Val just wants to clarify quickly before we adjourn.
Okay,
I got my many grants mixed up. So the MTSS grant is ARP funded. The Grow Your Own grant that we have is state competitive. So
I don't know how you find all that
Sorry.
information so quickly. Thank you. I was just curious because we know how, and you have stated so often how incredibly valuable that funding has been
Yeah.
for us. And so we, rightfully so, we know that that will not continue, but I just appreciate the work to take full advantage of the opportunities this funding provides us. So thank you.
yep, great, thank you. Okay, is there a motion? That's all the business we have for today. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Noel, second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.